Commander Velter stood on the bridge of the distant Echo, an exploration vessel built for journeys into the dark frontiers. Before him, the screen shimmered with the image of a blue world, glowing with the unmistakable light of civilization. But this planet should not exist. The galaxy's outer rim was a place of silence and death, a region scoured by radiation storms, cosmic winds, and the debris of long-forgotten supernovae. Life was not supposed to thrive here. No world, no species, no fragile flame of intelligence could survive in such a crucible. And yet, the readings told another story. His compound eyes scanned the impossible data again. Massive population centers. Orbital traffic. Industrial energy signatures that rivaled the heart of Council space. For 300 years, scientists of the Galactic Council had declared this region uninhabitable, a dead zone carved into star maps as a warning. Now, a single planet shattered that certainty. Behind him, Xena, his communication officer, looked up from her station. Her features glowed with confusion as she whispered, "Commander, these signals, they're growing stronger. The mathematics suggest intelligence. A civilization. How is this possible in the dead zone?" Velter's mandibles clicked together, a reflex of deep unease. He thought of the great species of the Council. The crystalline Zephyrians, who could process entire star systems of data in seconds. The Koran warriors, towering 3 meters tall, who bent steel as easily as bone. The Luminari, graceful beings of light who lived for millennia and manipulated energy with thought alone. All of them had earned their place among the 12,000 star systems of the Galactic Council. All of them had faced hardship, endured, and been measured worthy. And yet, what he saw here was something outside the Council's maps, outside its memory. "Take us into orbit," Velter ordered quietly, "but keep our shields at maximum. If these beings are truly alive in the rim, then they have learned to survive what we cannot. And that makes them dangerous." The distant echo drifted closer, and more impossible truths filled the screens. Orbital stations hung above the planet like jewels. Star ships, not crude, but elegant, rose and fell from the atmosphere. The signals were not background noise. They were communication, deliberate and mathematical, pulsing across the void as if acknowledging the distant echo's arrival. Xena's voice trembled now, caught between awe and fear. "Commander, they know we're here." And then, it happened. A silver vessel rose from the planet, smaller than the distant echo but moving with deliberate purpose. Its hull was smooth, its propulsion unlike anything in the Council's vast libraries of technology. It came not with weapons, but with patterns, sequences of prime numbers, complex but peaceful, a mathematical hand extended across the abyss. "They're asking to come aboard," Xena said. Every instinct told Velter to refuse. Protocol demanded consultation with the Council, centuries of tradition warned against rash contact. And yet, curiosity overruled fear. "If they wanted to destroy us," he said, "they would have done so already. Grant them permission to dock." The alien ship latched onto the distant echo's airlock with surgical precision. The docking was so smooth, so practiced, that Velter felt his second heart stutter. Whoever these beings were, they had traveled among stars for a long time. The airlock hissed open. And 3 figures stepped through. Not crystalline, not luminous, not armored giants, but bipeds, compact and fragile-looking, clad in synthetic materials instead of carapace or natural plating. Faces alive with expression, with emotion, with something that made them seem, strangely, familiar. The leader stepped forward, removed a transparent covering from his head, and revealed short dark hair, brown eyes, and a voice that carried calm confidence. "I am Captain Jake Morrison, Earth Defense Fleet. We welcome you to our space. May this be the beginning of friendship." The translator struggled, but the words were clear enough. Commander Velter stared at the human and spoke the truth that trembled on every tongue aboard the distant echo. "Our scientists believed no life could survive here. And yet, here you stand." Jake Morrison smiled, a warm, almost reckless smile. We've been hearing that a lot lately. Come. See our world. I think you'll find it interesting. Thus began the first contact. A meeting that would unravel the very foundations of what the council believed about life, intelligence, and survival itself. For in humanity, the galaxy would soon learn, there was something terrifying, something inspiring, and something utterly beyond comprehension. And nothing would ever be the same again. The council chamber of Orion Prime was carved from living crystal, a cathedral of light where 12,000 voices once moved as one. Today, however, that harmony had collapsed into chaos. For on the central dais stood the impossible. A human. Jake Morrison's uniform was simple, almost understated. Yet his presence was enough to fracture centuries of certainty. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy leaned forward, their voices layered in 1,000 dialects of disbelief. "This is a fraud," hissed the Corran warlord, his armor clashing as he rose to his full height. "No fragile world-born creature could exist in the rim." "It cannot be true," murmured a luminari, its form flickering with waves of pale fire. "Our maps have shown that region sterile for eons. Life cannot endure radiation storms of such magnitude." But Jake Morrison only stood taller, his eyes steady, his voice measured. "And yet here I am." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. For what could they say? The human existed. The human spoke. And the human claimed a world the council had long ago abandoned to the void. In the days that followed, the council demanded proof. Delegations were sent to Earth, cautious, armored, prepared for disappointment or ambush. What they found shook them to their very core. The planet was vibrant. Oceans teemed with life, forests stretched into the horizon, and skies roared with craft of impossible ingenuity. Earth was no barren wasteland clinging to survival. It was alive. Flourishing. And its people, these humans, were not cowering primitives. They were engineers, explorers, philosophers, and warriors. Their art resonated with complexity. Their science rivaled the council's. Their military ships were smaller, less elegant perhaps, but every observer admitted there was something unsettling in their design. Something purposeful. Back in Orion Prime, scientists from across the stars gathered in private councils. The debates grew heated, each new discovery about humanity tearing at the threads of long-held assumptions. "Do you not see?" cried a Zephyrian crystallographer, shards of light refracting wildly from his form. "They evolved in death zones. Environments where no sentience should even spark. And yet they not only survived, they thrived. Their biology is adaptive beyond measure. Their psychology borders on madness." A Corran general snarled. "Madness? You call this strength madness? They breed too quickly, they endure too much. Break their bones, they heal. Burn their cities, they rebuild. Kill their leaders, they adapt. There is no precedent for such resilience." Others whispered of darker truths. The council chamber of Orion Prime was carved from living crystal, a cathedral of light where 12,000 voices once moved as one. Today, however, that harmony had collapsed into chaos. For on the central dais stood the impossible. A human. Jake Morrison's uniform was simple, almost understated. Yet his presence was enough to fracture centuries of certainty. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy leaned forward, their voices layered in 1,000 dialects of disbelief. "This is a fraud," hissed the Corran warlord, his armor clashing as he rose to his full height. "No fragile world-born creature could exist in the rim." "It cannot be true," murmured a luminari, its form flickering with waves of pale fire. "Our maps have shown that region sterile for eons. Life cannot endure radiation storms of such magnitude." But Jake Morrison only stood taller, his eyes steady, his voice measured. "And yet here I am." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. For what could they say? The human existed. The human spoke. And the human claimed a world the council had long ago abandoned to the void. In the days that followed, the council demanded proof. Delegations were sent to Earth, cautious, armored, prepared for disappointment or ambush. What they found shook them to their very core. The planet was vibrant. Oceans teemed with life, forests stretched into the horizon, and skies roared with craft of impossible ingenuity. Earth was no barren wasteland clinging to survival. It was alive. Flourishing. And its people, these humans, were not cowering primitives. They were engineers, explorers, philosophers, and warriors. Their art resonated with complexity. Their science rivaled the council's. Their military ships were smaller, less elegant perhaps, but every observer admitted there was something unsettling in their design. Something purposeful. Back in Orion Prime, scientists from across the stars gathered in private councils. The debates grew heated, each new discovery about humanity tearing at the threads of long-held assumptions. "Do you not see?" cried a Zephyrian crystallographer, shards of light refracting wildly from his form. "They evolved in death zones. Environments where no sentience should even spark. And yet they not only survived, they thrived. Their biology is adaptive beyond measure. Their psychology borders on madness." A Koran general snarled. "Madness? You call this strength madness? They breed too quickly, they endure too much. Break their bones, they heal. Burn their cities, they rebuild. Kill their leaders, they adapt. There is no precedent for such resilience." Others whispered of darker truths. "They walk with death as if it were an old friend," a luminary observed. "Every culture, every philosophy they hold, it bends itself toward the acceptance of mortality. They do not fear extinction as we do. They expect it. And still, they fight." For the first time in memory, the Galactic Council knew fear. Not of war, they had faced wars countless times. Not of disease, nor of disaster. But of something deeper. Fear of the unknown. Because if humans could thrive in the Rim, what else could they do? When humanity was finally invited to sit among the council, an act born of desperation rather than trust, Jake Morrison spoke carefully, though his words carried an edge that unsettled even the oldest of species. "We have no wish for conquest. We seek knowledge, trade, partnership. But make no mistake, we will never again kneel to another power. We endured what you believed impossible. And in that endurance, we discovered something fundamental." He paused, letting his words stretch across the crystal chamber, letting every delegate feel the weight of them. Survival is not about strength. It is not about technology. It is about will. And in willpower, humanity stands unmatched. The chamber fell into silence. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, as though those words had carved something new into the bones of history. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, whispers spread. Some species saw humanity as saviors, proof that even in the harshest corners of existence, life could bloom. Refugees from dying worlds spoke of Earth as a beacon, a miracle, a sanctuary of hope. Others, however, whispered darker things. That humanity was a weapon, sharpened by a cruel universe for a purpose no one could yet see. That their smiles concealed a predator's patience. That their friendship was genuine, but their vengeance, should it be awakened, would be apocalyptic. And then there were the Harari, a quiet, neutral race known for riddles and prophecies. They spoke only once, but their words would linger in every council chamber. You celebrate the humans for surviving the Rim. But you do not ask why the Rim was empty to begin with. Their silence afterward was absolute. Jake Morrison never addressed the whispers directly. Instead, he guided humanity carefully into the galaxy's view, building alliances, sharing technologies, exploring distant stars. Yet beneath the diplomacy, an unspoken truth remained. The galaxy had spent 500,000 years believing itself the pinnacle of survival. And then came humanity, a species forged in fire, famine, plague, and endless war. A species that should not exist. A species that looked at death, and smiled. The council could not decide whether to welcome them, or to prepare for the day they would have to resist them. Because somewhere in the back of every alien mind, the same thought whispered like a shadow. If the rim could produce humanity, what else might it be hiding? Thus the balance of the galaxy shifted. No battle had been fought, no empire overthrown. And yet the simple existence of humanity, fragile, reckless, impossibly resilient, had become the greatest disruption in millennia. For the first time in ages, the council trembled. Not before an enemy, but before an idea. That perhaps survival was not their birthright. That perhaps strength was not theirs alone. That perhaps, they were no longer at the center of the story. The galaxy had begun to adjust, however uneasily, to the presence of humanity. Trade routes expanded to include Earth. Alliances shifted. Some species whispered admiration, others whispered fear. But beneath the surface of this uneasy equilibrium, something older stirred. It began with silence. Entire star systems stopped transmitting. Colonies went dark. Exploration fleets dispatched to investigate never returned. At first, the council blamed pirates or resource wars in the distant sectors. But as the disappearances spread, a pattern revealed itself. Someone, or something, was erasing civilizations. The first clear sign came from the Harari. Their ships drifted into Orion Prime carrying relics of dead worlds, fragments of cities cut apart not by war, but by surgical precision. The Harari, ever cryptic, delivered a single warning. The architects have returned. Their words echoed through the council chambers like a wound reopened. For in the oldest archives, buried beneath millennia of dust, there were whispers of the architects, a species so advanced, so patient, that they had shaped entire galaxies like clay. Their monuments littered dead systems, vast machines the size of moons, silent and waiting. No living race had ever claimed to see them. Most dismissed them as myth. But myths had a way of clawing back into truth. Commander Velter, the one who had first met humanity, stood in the council's war chamber as the evidence was presented. Images of planets hollowed into shells. Moons consumed by latticeworks of alien machinery. Stars themselves dimmed, as though leached of life. They do not conquer, a Zephyrian scientist whispered. They harvest. Delegates recoiled. The galaxy's greatest powers, its fiercest warriors, its most ancient thinkers, all reduced to frightened children in the face of the unknown. And then, slowly, all eyes turned to humanity. Jake Morrison sat at the table, his jaw tight, his expression grave. He had said little during the debates, listening instead as fear spread like wildfire. Now, at last, he spoke. You fear the architects because you cannot imagine surviving them. That is where humanity differs. We do not imagine survival. We make it real. A Koran general slammed his fist against the crystal table. You would pit your fragile species against gods. Morrison's eyes did not waver. We have lived in the shadow of extinction since the beginning. Disease. War. Catastrophe. We have faced threats that should have ended us 100 times over. And still we endure. If the architects return, then we will fight them as we have fought everything else, with stubbornness, with fury, with a will you cannot measure. His words carried no arrogance. Only conviction. And that conviction unsettled the chamber more than any boast could. In the months that followed, humanity became the center of a desperate gamble. Their fleets, smaller but fiercely adaptable, were dispatched alongside council armadas to probe the silent sectors. Their scientists, reckless but innovative, studied the ruins of architect machines when others dared not approach. Their soldiers volunteered for missions others considered suicide. And everywhere they went, one truth became undeniable: humanity thrived where others faltered. A crystalline world flooded with radiation, council crews collapsed, but human explorers walked out alive. A derelict station infected with nanite swarms, human engineers adapted its systems, turning infection into weapon. A void battle where an entire armada was crushed by a single architect construct, human ships, bloodied and broken, still returned to base carrying survivors. The galaxy watched in awe and unease. For in humanity, they saw both hope and danger. Hope, that perhaps survival against the architects was possible. Danger, that if such resilience ever turned against the Council itself, no power could stand. The Harari remained silent until the time was right. At last, in a chamber of starlight, they spoke a truth no one wished to hear. The architects shaped you too. Gasps rippled across the delegates. But the Harari continued, their voices like wind through ancient ruins. Why do you think humans alone thrive in chaos? Why do you think your world was left standing when all else in the rim was scoured clean? You were not spared by chance. You were prepared. You were sharpened. A heavy silence fell. Morrison clenched his fists. Prepared for what? The Harari's eyes glowed with sorrow. For war. For the final test. The architects build, and then they burn. They seed, and then they cull. You are the blade they left behind. The question is not whether you can fight them. The question is whether you will fight only them. The implication sank like poison into the chamber. Humanity, not a miracle of survival, but a weapon left to mature. A blade forged by hands unseen. The council splintered. Some argued humanity was salvation, the one chance to resist annihilation. Others demanded their containment, fearing they were as dangerous as the architects themselves. Civilizations that had stood united for millennia now fractured along a single fault line, humanity. Morrison, for his part, gave no answer. He returned to his people, to Earth, and prepared. For whether by design or defiance, humanity would fight. Not because they were chosen. Not because they were destined. But because it was what they had always done. And in that moment, for the first time, the galaxy truly understood the human condition. Fragile bodies. Finite lives. Endless struggle. And yet, an unbreakable will to stand against the dark, no matter how ancient, no matter how impossible. When the first true architect fleet emerged from the void, blotting out the stars with machines that stretched for light seconds, the council faltered. But humanity did not. For to be human was to face extinction with eyes wide open. To know death was certain, and to fight anyway. To refuse to kneel, even before gods. And in that defiance, a spark lit across the galaxy. The war of survival had begun. And at its center stood the species that should not exist. Humanity.